everyone wants to have that budget in front of them.
What page is that?
That is page,
If I can zoom that out.
yeah, 67.
It's the power.
I lost Joe Kenny. His nameplate's not out. I don't know if it's. I am Mary Sullivan, City of Darien, Alderperson for Ward 5. I serve as the chairperson for the Administrative and Finance Committee. I would like to call to order our meeting of the whole on this second budget workshop meeting, Wednesday, February 26, 2025. We will be reviewing the city's fiscal year 2026 budget with city alderpersons, the mayor, our city treasurer, the city administrator, and senior staff present in the council chambers. We will continue to review, discuss, and conduct Q&A and come to a consensus at the fiscal year 2026 budget. The documents have all been received that have been a collaborative effort by the staff, the mayor, and the treasurer, and the city administrator. I'll be your facilitator tonight once again. Tonight is the second in a series of meetings with the end goal being to have a public hearing on the budget and the city council to approve on Monday, April 7th. Tonight, we will begin with the police budget. Then we will move on to the water, MFT, and SSA budgets. And if there's a few items too from last week that we might want to review with Dan Gombeck. And then finally, we will cover the city council and administrative budgets if time allows. And we can also go back to any other loose ends from our prior discussions. We made great progress last week, and I hope that very possibly we conclude the review process tonight. If not, we will have an opportunity to go back to the budgets and discussions at our city council meeting, which is coming up this Monday, March 3rd. And if we still have things lingering, there is another Administrative Finance Committee of a whole scheduled for Wednesday, March 5th at 6 p.m. Many of this year's items in the budgets were discussed in our goal setting in the fall, and some of them are projects that are carrying over from that were not completed in fiscal year 2025. Everyone's had an opportunity to have a copy of the budget. The budget resides on the City of Darien website, and this meeting is being viewed on cable channel 6 as well as the Darien YouTube channel. Without further ado, Mayor Marquez, do you have anything else to add before we start with the police?
No, ma'am.
Okay. Treasurer Corn?
Nope.
Okay. Administrator Vanna, anything to add before the police? Okay. With that, then we will hand it over to our Chief Thomas and Deputy Chief Norton to start with the police pension, the police budget, which starts on page 66 of the packet. Okay.
All right. They're pretty much the same. It's usually the same. Salaries are discussed during a collective bargaining agreement, and you'll see the out years for the salary for sworn are put in 3%. Don't know if it's going to be. This is a contract year prior to this next budget for 2027 budget. So it's more of a placeholder than anything. And then it's a less budget than last year because last year current fiscal year, we purchased 12 new squad cars and all the upfitting for those cars, so that's a significant expense that we won't have to do for a while yet. We'll get to all those things, probably the items that interest and expense is the social worker for $85,000. We'll talk about that when we get there, I guess. And I think that's, then there's some items under equipment, the evidence area and employee appreciation that are also in the price tag out. I'll conclude my overview.
Okay. Anything else in the overview? Okay, so then we'll dive right into the line items. We're gonna start off on page 68, which is the supporting pages, and start with account 4010, salaries. Discussion on salaries, civilian salaries, I'm sorry, not officers. Any discussion on civilian salaries?
Those are also contractual.
Okay,
And they're a year behind the officers, so the 2027 estimate is probably pretty accurate with the 2028.
okay. 4020, salaries officers, which is also contractual. Then 4030, overtime.
Chief, there's been a couple questions I received on overtime. Maybe you can give us maybe a little overview. It obviously exceeded what we estimated in the original budget, and there's a number of reasons you are best to explain that.
Sure. A couple things. Well, one thing that we don't account for, at least in the budget, the expense budget, is the revenue side. So the SRO overtime, it's a little over $11,000. That comes back. It's charged to Hinsdale South, and they pay us. The task force officer, that's nearly $30,000, $27,000. That also gets reimbursed through the feds. We had in this current fiscal year one retirement, and that officer, sorry, had 168 hours to be paid out, plus some other expenses. But for overtime, that would be come out of the compensatory time that we put in the budget as a liability. So we have to pay those guys if they decide to turn all their time in. This year was a high year for overtime. We had 4 officers, 2 new officers, and then 1 retirement, and 1 officer that we hadn't replaced. Just the hiring cycle was not good for us. So we had 4 officers in the training program. For every 8 hours you're with a training officer, the training officer earns an hour and a half or an hour at overtime rate, however you want to say it. So FTO overtime this year was about $75,000. So that was a big add.
Chief, I'm sorry, just on that, maybe you could just explain how often that happens. You know, they're on probation, but that happens often, pretty much all the time until they're released, I believe.
Well, there's a couple different ways that overtime's earned. So the FTO earns overtime when they have a recruit officer, probationary officer. But also that probationary officer is earning overtime as well. So when we go to basic academy, in order to get all the hours in, they actually do extra hours. And so we have to pay those for those extra hours as well. So as long as we're going to be hiring, we're going to be sending people to the FTO program. And it's, the FTO program is 16 weeks long with 3 2-week extensions if they need some additional help. So we're down 2 officers currently, and so we'll be doing some more hiring and more training. Maybe not 4, hopefully not 4, but we'll see how that plays out. Because of that, we made some changes to the FTO program. So Now there's no longer ratings in the first 10 weeks. Actually, there's no ratings in the first 12 weeks. And so that can help move that person along. Recruit officer, probationary officer gets some feedback, but it's not numerically rated. So our DORs, you fill out this whole long thing about everything that officer did, and then you go through this whole rating. So by eliminating that
Chief,
rating
I'm sorry,
process.
we get a text that it's a little hard to hear you, so you have to speak up a bit.
Oh,
Sometimes
sure.
that table's moved a little bit because of that new
I
microphone.
saw
It's hard
it
to pick up.
the table.
Yeah.
So the officer that's getting trained, the probationary officer has more opportunity for repetition. So hopefully that additional repetition means that they're going to make it through the program more likely than if they're not. Been around for a long time. Started in 1978. 10 weeks of training then. Still we have 10 weeks of training now. 40 some years later. We changed that to 12 in order to move them along at a better rate. We added some new FTOs to the program. We changed the hiring process. The hiring process was to be 50% written, 50% oral. We changed that because the people in the know say that the written test is not as good as the oral structured oral interview and choosing who's going to be a good police officer. So we made those changes. We restructured the interview from 5 questions to 4 questions, made it much more practical and in line with what we do as police. So hopefully through that process, we're going to be more successful with our patrol probationary officers and having them be more successful. We also have a cultural change. So you have newer officers, and newer officers like more time off. And more time off just creates more overtime. By contract, we allow only one person off by any type of paid time off. But when you have a sick day or something else along with that, or a training day, then the sergeant has to make a decision whether or not they're going to hire overtime. So we do that. Officers can only stay at 160 hours capped. By statute, you can go up to 480, but by contract, it's 160. Julie does a good job of keeping officers at that level, and anything over that 160 pays out. This year is an ugly year, not only because of hiring, but because of injured officers. So we currently have 5 officers that are not on patrol. So there's less or a little bit more than 20% of our workforce is either sitting at home recuperating or sitting in the building on restricted duty. So that adds a lot of overtime. Again, people are having surgery and doing whatever, and hopefully getting back to full-time work. So hopefully in fiscal year 2026, we won't have that big of a problem. So that's somewhat of overview of overtime and where all the money went.
Any questions for Chief on the overtime area, account 4030?
My only question is 550 for this next year gonna be sufficient? I'd rather guess high than guess low, and based on what you just said, it doesn't seem like there's gonna be a dramatic amount of changes and the type of things. You're still gonna have officers doing these new things while they're getting experience. So do you think, are you comfortable with 550, or should it, because it's 16,000 less than what our estimated actual is this year. So it just seems, should it be the same as this year?
I would not argue with going higher and more comp time sellback. There's again more officers keeping that overtime, so boost that up a little bit, and a tad into the generals overtime. So that would be a good estimate to go 550.
How did we get it down to 344 in 2024? Seems like that's a pretty hefty increase then from 2024 with things that much different back
2024,
then.
there was probably nobody sick or injured. I'd have to look back at that time frame. And also, I don't believe we hired anybody in 2024. We had a whole year with out hiring.
The injuries you have, are they on duty, are they off duty, and and is there a differential between?
Yeah, well, yes and no. There's two of them have been gone through the process and have been determined as workman's comp. One just occurred a couple weeks ago, and that I don't believe that decision's been made yet. And one's pregnant, and the other one is currently so if it's workman's comp, it's paid out of workman's comp, not out of the budget. It really, it doesn't really impact the overtime other than replacing people that are gone.
Anything else? Okay,
The
we're gonna,
only other one is the discretionary overtime for the payment.
We've been doing that every year, haven't we?
Yeah, it's actually federally mandated that you pay for kennel maintenance. There's different ways that you can do it. I think the best way is the way we do it with overtime. It's I don't know if any other agency doesn't do it that way. But if you're gonna have a canine, you gotta do it.
Chief, I think some years back, I started putting that discretionary, it could have been in between canines, and there was a policy discussion. So that really, yeah, that's a real maintenance expense. I could probably do that.
That's why I was asking the question, that's why I thought too, so.
okay. Okay, we're gonna move on to benefits. Any questions in the benefits area?
Yeah, I have a comment.
Yes,
on
Mike.
that. Brian, on this one, we're budgeting the $2,972,000 for the police pension, which is based on the actuarial report. But the next year, you're only going up to $2,978,000. You're only increasing it by $6,000, which it's never gone up such a nominal amount. The third year out, you've got it with about a $400,000 or $500,000 increase. But it looks like it might be a little light in the 27 budget forecast.
I'll have to look,
No, we changed it.
It was changed.
It's changed.
3.4.
Oh, I'm sorry. I've still got my original.
3.9.
That's right, I'm sorry, Mike.
I've got
That's
my
the two
original
numbers in
schedule.
yellow.
Sorry.
3.4 and 3.9.
Put the new sheet in. Thank you.
Oh, good, so in case people were looking at the old one, thanks for pointing that out, Mike. So, okay. Anything else on benefits? Operating? Animal control, auxiliary police has been removed. Boards and commission?
Just real quick on the auxiliary program.
Yes.
Talking to Jason, that when that first came out, I think he said that there was actually more auxiliary officers than actual sworn officers. It was a great program for a long period of time. We're down to 3 auxiliary personnel now. They're just the time frame that they get in to interact is light. To go back to 10 auxiliary officers would just throw a lot more expense in there for radios and vests and uniforms and the like. And so they've done a great job there with different things that they've done, but it's just the end of that.
Thanks for explaining, Chief. Boards and commissions? Dues and subscriptions? Okay, we're gonna go on to the next page, 69. Investigation and equipment.
Do we do contractual services?
No, not,
Way down there.
that's way down.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I'm looking on,
You're still looking at,
the
okay.
backup, Eric, these guys, I'm going through it like this.
Oh, you're
Yeah.
going through that.
That's just,
I'm on the
that's
front.
the order, so. Okay, so account 4217, investigation and equipment, page 69. Any questions on those areas? Liability insurance, maintenance equipment.
I'm sorry, going back to investigation equipment, what's 7,500 for text messaging, just new phones or?
So we have currently Muni CMS is what we've been operating, and I don't know, for those of you who are actually on that system, we've been having issues with the process. Supervisor will send out a text, we'll get multiple texts or people aren't receiving them, so we're exploring the need to possibly replace that and go with something different.
Makes sense, okay.
Kind of gotten some just ballpark costs for it, and it seems to be in the range.
Gotcha, cool.
thanks, Jason. Liability insurance, maintenance equipment, maintenance vehicles. Postage mailings, printing forms, public relations, rent, supplies, training, and education. The rest of page 69. Any more questions on the remainder of page 69?
It's already paid for it, but I know we budgeted 850 for the cars and it came in about 100,000 higher. Is that right, or is it just more equipment, or?
No, we get down to, capital, playing it now. So, spend 10 minutes.
Sorry, Chief.
Oh, sorry. The, I think what it was is, and I know what it is now, is the way that we keep our track of our stuff, we keep it on a spreadsheet and put in the total cost, we think it's 870.
Okay.
And then, the line items, contingency, vehicles, and the vehicle setup. So going through that process, we pay, we put it in our spreadsheet right away. We know what it costs. Julie puts it in when she pays it, check. So they're a little bit off. Okay. So when we, put the budget together, we send it in before Christmas. We usually put it in early. So I think what it was is that, those numbers got inflated. So what the actual number is the budgeted number was 870,000. It looks like it's one hundred, so I know what I'm talking about.
So in my master sheets, Chief and I had talked about this, and that'll be one of the changes the council will get in the final budget, the reduction to, I think it was about whatever the chief's number's gonna get you, so that was, we'll be reducing that.
But it makes sense how the numbers came about, right?
It makes sense now that, there's a couple more things there. So in the budget, I think, or in our tracking, Rose put in the, administrative vehicles, which, we paid for out of equitable sharing funds. So that was $65,181, miss. So that brings us, to, 875, that was budgeted. We're probably gonna actually spend about 752,000, so we should have remaining in that budget, 123,000.
Gotcha. Just for my own knowledge, the old police cars we got rid of, were they 5 or 6 years old? Because
6.
we went 6 on those, eh? Wow, okay.
Any other questions on page 69? Okay, we're moving on to page 70. Travel and meetings, 4265 account. Any questions on? There's backup on page 71 for for conference and seminars. Any questions on any of those items on travel and meetings?
So Chief, it says at this conference, an additional seat. How many seats do we have already?
Additional what?
It says for an additional seat at some conference.
International Association of Chiefs of Police, IACP, I believe.
Yes, sir.
So that's the International Association of Chiefs of Police. Chief Thomas invited me to go last year. I don't know how long Chief Thomas plans on sticking around. I think part of the succession program is getting some of our other officers involved in this process. I thought it was very eye-opening, a good learning experience, and I think we just want to try to get one of our.
Okay, so right now the seat is just for the chief and then the second seat is for you.
Correct.
Got it.
That's what we've had for this previous year or the current fiscal year. Moving forward, looking for 3.
Thank you.
Any other questions on travel and meetings? Okay, telephone? Uniforms? Utilities? Vehicle? Okay, let's go on to contractual services, 4325. Any questions on contractual services, consulting and professional services? 4325.
Mayor, I'm sorry, I thought Eric had questions.
I do on 4337.
Yeah, I think he's got questions on the,
Okay.
yeah.
I'm sorry.
Next one, thank you though, Brian.
So if none on 4325, we'll move into 4377. Eric?
4337.
I'm sorry, 4337.
The social worker. I saw today that in the town of Burr Ridge, they're adding a social worker in their budget, but they're splitting it between 3 towns. I don't, just want to get your sense on that, if that's something that is we're open to.
We are one of the 3 towns.
We are one
We
of the
are.
3 towns.
Oh, good. So the 80, so is this 85? Is that a third?
No, when the budget was put together, and we put that together November of last year, and so we looked at a total amount for contractual services for about 40 hours a week from a social worker. The issue that you're talking about with Burr Ridge and the other communities just happened like 2 weeks ago or less. And so we went to a meeting with the chiefs and we discussed that value. I'm still not necessarily sold because if there's 4 agencies, 40 hours, that's 10 hours a week. And
Yeah.
so let's talk a little bit about what that social worker looks like. So last year, or again, last year, because it's not talking a calendar year, not a budget year. So last year is correct. So in 2024, we went to almost 16,000 calls. Many of those could have used a social worker. Mental health, 121 times. Domestic relations, 301 times with 36 arrests. Drug and alcohol abuse, 46 overdoses. A number of elder problems, either neglect or hoarding. And those are put in the system in a different way, and they're hard to separate and determine the exact number. Juvenile problems with 74, missing persons and runaways was 39. So there's quite a bit of work that individual can do, and I'm not certain that 10 hours is going to be enough for our agency. Now, we're still going to partner with those other agencies and see what we can do with grants and other funding mechanisms. Personally, I would prefer to leave it in as 85 and see how that plays out. Jason went to Northeast DuPage Family Youth Services, Memphis, because I don't want to say that over again. So like you said, we have been in discussions with those other agencies. Came from Aurora where we had a social worker, and she had anywhere from 4 to 8 interns that were in the master's program. Worked out very well. We had a robust chaplain program with 16 chaplains headed by Father Leak. It was great. We also had a victim services unit, so we had a lot of people to draw from. Here we haven't had that, and the addition of the social worker, I think, is going to be tremendous. There's a lot of different models out there, and I think we're going to settle on this one. So then Glendale Heights has been doing this for a long time, probably half again as big as us, I'm not sure, about 32,000, I think, maybe a little bit more. And so Chief Pappas shared some of his results with me. And 2022, he had 608 referrals. 23, he had 758 referrals. And 24, he had 889 referrals. But the same type of cases. So his mental health issues has declined 34%. Domestic disturbances are down 10%, and batteries are down 10% as well. So the use of the social worker has gone up over time, and the crime and related things that we would hope that the social worker would be able to help long-term has trended down. So I think it's going to be a great program. I'd love to get it implemented. And I personally think that we're going to use more than 10 hours.
I've talked to mayors from other towns, and Woodridge has a full-time social worker. Other municipalities have full-time social workers, so this is nothing new that we're doing. We're actually a little late to the game when it comes to having a social worker, because other towns have had this for a number of years. And I really think, as Greg pointed out, there's a lot of need for us to have a social worker.
Yeah.
And it's not that our officers aren't trained to handle certain situations. This is kind of after the fact, right, Jason?
Correct.
A number of different things. So late in the game, I'm not certain about that. We've been using CIT, which is just a different model of how to respond. There's co-responder models, there's hybrid models, there's a lot of different things out there and available that you put together. I think the social worker is going to be an enhancement. We're not going to change our response plan for officers going to the scene and those type of things. There's 988, there's 4 levels to a 988 call. 3 of them still require the police. So most calls are still going to be handled by the police, so that's not going to change. It's that handoff in order to fix a problem versus just going there and immediately fixing the thing and let it go happen again tomorrow and the next day and the next day. Social worker's gonna add tremendously to that process. And hopefully, if we have half the success that other agencies have had with reducing repeat calls to locations and repeat calls to individuals, it's gonna be a great payoff.
Chief, on the 85,000, so we're only gonna get 10 hours out of this person?
No, out of 85,000, that's gonna be 40 hours.
Okay, so we'll get a full-time to us. Okay.
So what are you gonna try this
Conversation with
deal with
those
Burr
other
Ridge
agents.
first?
Conversations with those other agencies were splitting that person up. Again, I don't know that 10 hours is gonna be enough for us, but we haven't finished all that conversation with those other agencies. That was maybe an hour. And just scratching on a napkin, nothing was ever decided, no IGA just worked out, nothing like that.
And the person that, I'm sorry, the person you'd be thinking about getting this, what kind of, obviously they have a social, worker background. Are you looking for specific, somebody fresh out of college, somebody unseasoned? What are you looking for?
NEDFIS is going to provide that individual.
Oh, there, okay.
Yeah, if you look at page 72, it explains where the individual would be resourced from
Okay.
for the 85,000 if we did a full-time
Yeah,
person.
They do a very good job. I've talked to her a couple times. Jason was the first one to reach out to her. And she understands the policing model and social worker within the policing model. And she has a good idea and a good grasp on that. And, I don't know who she has available, if she has somebody available. Initially, she said that she wouldn't have, if we wanted to do it today, which was a month or better ago, she wouldn't have anybody, but she would have somebody soon.
So what are you trying to, you're gonna try the split first with Burr Ridge? Is that what I'm hearing? You're gonna give that a try,
There's
or?
4 agencies, and I don't know how that's going to work out, because we only had one meeting that was less than a
Okay.
week ago.
Okay,
So I don't know how that's going to work out.
okay.
I am asking this group to budget 85,000 so I can have enough money to make that happen. Now, we may look at, and I think we need to grow into it, so we might have that individual here for 10 hours a week. And then within a month, we're gonna say that's not enough, we're gonna contract more or ask for more. I don't know how that's gonna work out until
Okay.
we're actually physically there. But for the budget, I'm asking for the full price for social worker.
For full-time.
Yeah, it sounds like you're still premature in the vetting with the other communities, so you want to have an opportunity that
Yeah,
if,
I don't know how.
to-
that
all the
could
top
fall
end.
apart For whatever reason. I don't
Okay.
know.
right,
They
too,
have to
pretty
go through
soon.
the same process. Sounds like Burr Ridge might already be there, which is a great knowledge that that's
Yeah.
going on. But I don't know how that's gonna work out. The 4 chiefs talking and saying, if 1 week I do 9 and the next week I do 11, we're still in that ballpark range. And then other people get involved in writing up an IGA, and it doesn't play out that way, so.
Okay,
I think there's just too many things in the air. I think the cleanest way would be.
so you're
for
covering
you guys-
yourself.
For the council to approve the 85,000, and then we'll finish working out the details.
Okay.
There's also some grants available too, so if we
Yeah, I was gonna
get a
say.
grant for some of the process, that's gonna reduce that number as well. I'd rather
Brian?
go high and be able to come in low than ask for low and have a poor program.
What kind of challenges would you have with payroll with, 4 different towns with the same person?
Julie's problem.
Julia, listen, I tried, buddy. I was trying to back you up, pal, okay?
Good answer.
No, it's not payroll, cause it's not, a personnel, it's, contract. It's
Chief,
contract,
bottom line, this sounds like
contracting
this
with
is-
them. So all that process is all on, Nedfis.
This sounds like something you're 100% from the way you guys talk about it, it's an absolute necessity.
I think it's a big enhancement, and, yeah, I would even go to necessity, I think so.
That's all I didn't know.
Brian?
Yeah, Mary, just one comment. It's more of a general budget comment. On things like this, when we have social worker in discretionary in year one, if you were to go to the backup for the 3-year budget, it is also already in years 2 and 3. So by the council approving this, it is built into the 3-year.
I think this is gonna be something that we're gonna grow into. We're eventually gonna have full-time social worker working with our department. I would like to see that. Greg, as Greg stated, that it's gonna be a gradual thing where it's gonna grow. But you're eventually gonna have this person with a big caseload, and I think eventually it'll be a full-time job.
Sad but true.
Is there
I think
any
it's a great idea. My question is, are we, with working with this group are we going to be receiving a social worker? Because I think it's important that they would develop a relationship with staff and with your officers.
It is a social worker.
Okay.
So you don't get, social worker A this week, and, we're gonna
Exactly.
send B over there
Exactly.
next week, and all
Right,
that other stuff.
continuity.
You get social worker A, throughout.
And the quote was a non-binding estimate, but we don't anticipate it being higher than that.
Our conversation on 2 weeks ago with the 4 chiefs, the flyer they gave was 95,000.
Is there an opportunity for using C's funds on that, on the first year or anything?
No, I'll check into that, because, some contractual, things are and some are not, so let me check. I'm not positive off the top of my head.
So you're gonna explore C's funds and maybe any grants and things,
Correct.
opportunities. Any more questions on social worker? Okay, moving on to equipment. 4815. Any questions on equipment? Any more questions overall on the police department budget? Chief Thomas for Deputy Chief Norton, while they're here? Nothing else? Okay. Gentlemen, do you have anything else to add?
No, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you guys for your time. Okay. Okay, so that wraps up police. And, does anyone need a quick break, or should we dive into, water? Okay. Okay, dive into water, okay. So, yeah, everyone wants to, 244, page 244, water revenue budget. Okay,
Dan wants to know why you guys went easier on the chief than you do on him.
oh,
Thanks, Mike, appreciate that.
I
You know why? They got these things.
Dan wants to know, they're packing heat, that's why.
Looking at the schedule, I would have probably given you a little bit different, where it might be helpful if we could finish just city council and admin. That way we've wrapped up the general fund, if that's okay.
That's
with
fine,
you.
I just didn't know since Dan came in for this.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Okay, so you're saying let's pivot and wait to do Dan?
Make Dan wait.
Okay, so we're gonna wait to do water, FT and SSA, and we're gonna go to city council budget?
Yeah, I think that,
Okay, so are we doing admin budget first?
Go to city council. It's
Okay,
like
so let's
being
go
in the full-time World War I.
to page 51. Page 51, city council budget. Everyone got that paperwork in front of them now? Since I put you on a wild goose chase with Dan? Okay. So page 51, city council budget. Backup starts on page 52. We'll start off with salaries and benefits. Okay. No questions there. We'll go into operating, which is boards and commissions. Yes,
Mary?
Brian?
We added the holiday decorating contest. We're gonna do 2 this year. We're gonna have a holiday decorating committee
Okay,
instead of just doing, Christmas holidays, we're gonna do one for the Halloween.
Halloween. And so that's gonna be a different committee than the
Be the same-
Christmas?
It would be the same committee. They'll just start doing it for the Halloween. And then we'll do the same thing where we give out prizes for the best house decoration. Then we'll do it again in December for the
Okay.
Christmas.
Any questions on the addition of Halloween? And of course, maintaining the holiday. Moving on to cable operations. And moseying down to dues and subscriptions, 4213. Any questions on dues and subscriptions?
Yeah, do the aldermen have a set dollar amount that they can spend on certain dues and things?
That's under training, Eric, a different line item.
That's under training?
That's on the next page.
Okay, all right, I'll wait.
Any more questions on dues and subscriptions? Public relations. Okay, we'll turn on to page 53. Training and education, account 4263 in the amount of $3,500. Brian, you want to explain?
Yeah,
That's
can
per-
you-
That's been a similar number for a number of years, and I don't remember when that started. And that allocates, the math should work out to $350 per 10 elected officials.
It was originally $100 apiece, it was at
Yeah.
1,000, and then set it up where everybody could go to the annual meeting for IMRF or something, which equated to the 350 if they wanted to, but people haven't been taking advantage of that too much.
Like
But
the
it was-
time you and I went to that seminar, that newly elected official seminar, it came out of here. If you go to a DMMC
But
meeting,
your question was the 350 per elected official.
Right.
but that's for specific events, training,
Right.
Yeah,
it's,
that's, I think what Mike mentioned too, that, years back when this started, the Illinois Municipal League has a conference in Chicago once a year.
Right, it's
and
always in
there's
the fall.
10 or 15 different sessions, and that's when we did, at that time, contemplate there might be more interests, which there still might be.
When we go down to Springfield, is that part of it as well, or no?
No, that's a difference.
But does it have to be spent on that specific item?
No, there was no restrictions. There was an anticipation that it would be, that there was interest in IML, but I've always said if an alderman sees different training, and there's a number of places to go, that they should just put a request in for that training. And the total limit for the year was set at $350. And that again, it's not like the mayors and managers do things like that. It is literally training at, one of the groups we're involved with or somebody, something else similar.
Now, what if we want to have a festival in our ward? Can be
You
spent
have
on
to ask your
that?
peers again for that money, to budget money for that.
but that's not part of this
That's
budget.
not in the
You
budget
can't use
either,
the
no.
350 for that?
No, and Alderman has asked for that, for those of you who might not recall, or we did it last year. Eric's asked for money for block parties in his
Right.
ward, and that has not been in the budget yet.
But you can't use the 350 for that, you're telling me.
No, it's training.
Correct, the 350 is for training and education, not
That-
for,
that- You get a lot of education in the party.
Eric, this is your
Depends
chance
what
to
kind of
ask, Eric, this is your chance to ask the
after a
council
12-pack.
for that item, I think, is what you're trying to do, right?
Okay.
so are you asking?
No,
Okay.
just gonna spend my own money, that's all.
Well, as the rest of us do. Any more questions on training and education? Travel and meetings? Contractual services? Equipment?
There's no equipment.
So,
I'll
Okay.
approve that one.
okay. Any other questions on the city council budget? Okay. We'll move on to administration department budgets. Page 4.
Just in terms of overall on
Yes.
page 4, my question really relates more to Brian and the overall expense. Telephone, we budgeted 42, this year's coming in at 30, and yet we're projecting 43, 44, 45 roughly for the next 3 years. I think we've redone the telephone, so I'm guessing since this year is down, I mean, it's not a big deal, but it's about $10,000 higher than we're projecting current year.
Yeah, we'll check that number. I know in a couple of telephone lines, we still have hardwire, we have a mobile phone, so we'll just double check that going out.
Okay.
What else? Oh, contingency, we have budgeted 10, we only have 800 year-to-date, but we're still projecting 10 in there.
I always project a 10 on the contingency because exactly what it's for, something comes up that we're not aware of yet. We still have a couple of months.
Okay, how about this one then, equipment, budgeted, projecting 16,062, and we've got nothing through January.
I'll look at that, Mike.
Yeah,
'cause
it looks
I
like a
have,
very-
we have to open another budget. I'm
Yeah, it
not
looks
sure
like a
what-
very specific number that you might have thrown in there.
You're saying for contingency, it's only 800 as of January?
Right, and equipment is 0 as of
Zero,
January?
okay. Anything else on the overview page, Mike? Page 4? Okay. Then we'll dive into page 5, where we're going by accounts. Any questions on salaries and benefits?
Well, this year's salaries is saying, 5 full-time and 1 part-time. I don't know how many, was that the same numbers last year? Last year didn't have the numbers broken out. And this year's budget is 479 versus 408 last year.
Well, we added the part-time accounting person.
Okay.
Yeah.
That would account for that.
Yeah, I would have to look at the 2 spreadsheets, Mike, but it,
Okay,
you
that's,
did break out the
that's probably,
part-time.
okay,
Yeah.
that part-time person, though, that makes sense, then I'm okay with that.
Okay. Anything else on salary and benefits? Okay, moving into operating. Dues and subscriptions.
Dues and subscriptions, again, last year we budgeted $600 for books and publications. All of a sudden, we've got a very specific number of 1,076 for next year. Seems like a funky number. It's small, but
That, that includes SurveyMonkey, if we use it.
okay, that's why it's such a very specific number.
Yeah.
Okay, yep.
And you
But you had something in mind?
service.
And
Okay.
it's Zoom, and in the event we have to use Zoom, that's also included in that.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions on dues and subscriptions? Liability insurance. Okay, legal notices, maintenance and equipment and vehicles, any questions on those areas? Postage and printing. Okay, move on to page 6. Account 4239, Public Relations. Citizens of the Year, the newsletter. Any items? There's backup for newsletter, communications retainer, and podcasts. Any questions? 4239. Okay. Rent and equipment, supplies, training and education, travel and meetings, any of those areas on page 6. Okay. Telephone,
Question on there, last year we had IP communications, we had 3,100, this year 5,100. What is the IP communications and why is it up 2,000?
So that's who we have our telephone service with. We have an annual contract with them. And then any additions that we may have, when we have new officers, we had to get extra licenses, new phone lines for the new people.
Thank you.
utilities, vehicle. Any other questions on the upper part of page 6? And we'll go into contractual services. Okay,
Real quick, back on the liability insurance, just year over year, we were up like $6,700.
I'm sorry, Jay, I couldn't.
We were up $6,700 year over year on the liability insurance. Is that just a rate increase or what else goes into that?
Yeah. We're part of a municipal insurance pool and it's based on revenues and they recalculate every year and depending on loss history. But there's typically also things in there like deductibles and different things, so I don't know the specific, what makes up the 6,000.
you're talking about account 4219, liability insurance?
And this is Irma, right, Brian?
It is.
Part, yeah, in part, yes.
Yeah, and we also have flexibility with Irma. If you recall, we leave a certain amount of deposit. If we don't use everything, we leave it on deposit. The last year, we were able to earn over 14% on the funds we left deposited with them. So we did pull out some to bring this year's balance down to around what we budgeted. But we still have a fairly significant number invested with them. And the auditors, I don't know if you recall, last year, they did a prior period adjustment for about $1 million that they were required to record that on the balance sheet now. So now whatever that investment performance is reflected there. But as of the last statement that I saw Julie gave me, it was up about 14% for the year.
Okay.
So nice,
Yeah.
Jerry, in addition to that too, we do have, as I mentioned, some of the base rate are the premiums based on our revenue, but they also look at loss history, so they'll look at a 5-year period. So there are times when you might get, the 5th year will come off your history, a new year will come on, and if the new year's, it has more claims to it, they might adjust that also.
So what revenue? What revenue you refer to?
Annually, we do Irma sends out a Excel spreadsheet to all the communities, and it's all your general fund revenue, your, Julie, do you recall, it's the general fund revenue, water, sewer, things like that, pretty much most of the budget. And they do have some deductions if it's literally a pass-through cost. So we go to we receive the request from Irma every year, we go through our audit and fill in those numbers.
One thing that could have a bearing on that, and we talked about this a long time ago, I think even, again, John Podorowski, I think, was involved, where we have a deductible of $5,000 per occurrence, and I think we budget for, maybe 5 of those in different departments, Brian? Somewhere in that number.
25.
But I know
Yeah.
the thought was we could increase that deductible from 5 to 10 and see if it would reduce the premium. It wasn't a significant decrease, as I recall, so that was the reason we kept it at 5,000. We haven't looked at that for a while.
At 2,500 now we are.
Oh, 25? Okay,
Yes.
I'm sorry.
You know, we looked at that for a couple years straight, and again, it's just how much more risk you want. It's not predictable, so we have always stayed at the 25.
But we have looked at that in the past, and just that is another piece of it.
Because I just thought if our revenues are down from 24, that this would have come down, but I guess not.
It depends on about 70 communities and all of their revenues and loss history. There's a calculation.
It's more of a pool.
It is municipal, yes.
Got it.
You go with that? Okay. We'll jump back then to page 6 where we were gonna head into contractual services, account 4320 and 4325. Any questions on contractual services? There's a couple of items on there with backup, the computer support, computers and parts, as well as the website update on supporting pages behind. Any discussion or questions on those?
We'll come back, actually Mayor Marquez, Lisa, we're in a meeting with the company that helps us, And they gave us a couple different estimates, so that again will come back before the committee and city council
For the website update?
for the website
Okay.
update, yes.
We didn't go with the gold package, we went more with the silver package.
Okay.
I went with the silver package.
I
And
like
then,
the-
Silver package is pretty good though.
Avoid the bronze one.
stone, how about a stone package? Okay, and nothing else, then contingency, Brian, you already said you'd like to keep it at 10? It's on the bottom of
Well,
page
I
6?
mean, that's a number that comes up.
Sure.
Within a $16 million budget, whatever we have, 10, I try to keep that, and when Dan tries to raid that, I shift him back to his budget and keep it for things that we really weren't aware of.
All right,
Sure.
we're gonna move on to page 7. To wrap up this budget, we've got janitorial services, building improvements, and equipment. Any questions on the remaining administrative department budget on page 7? Okay, well, then we'll wrap that up. Okay, and then we'll move on to Dan. Is that okay, Brian?
I'm sorry, Mayor, I was.
We're gonna wrap up administrative and we're gonna move on to water.
Yeah, just, again, now that that's wrapped up, the general fund, and that whole picture's put together, there might be some questions later now that the council has gone through all of those general fund revenues and all the general fund budgets, but I think for now, to move to the water fund's a good idea.
Right, okay. So we're back to page 243. Okay, water revenue budget. Dan?
I have none to start with. I'm more than happy to answer any questions prior to.
Mayor, usually on the water fund, I'll work mostly on the revenues and get information from Dan, and Dan does all the expenses, so.
Okay.
I mean, how you wanna go through that.
Okay, so you wanna start?
Yeah, I think, I don't have my cover memo here, if I'm looking for it. I gave an overview on the water fund and the water rates. And the city has not increased the water rates for a number of years. And I have that in the memo, I'm just not seeing it here, but it's been a long time, since 2016. And I think for anybody that's been around for a while, Dan and the municipal services have done just a wonderful job on really updating our water system. All kinds of different things they've done over the years. And more recently, the change out of the meters and working with the county. So we've done a lot of capital projects, and we have tried to maintain a balance in there that's reasonable. We usually look at 3 to 6 months depending on the fund. And this is the first year since 16 that I have recommended an increase to the rate. Now, there's a couple different parts of a municipal water rate. One is the rate per thousand, which varies, and then there's a fixed cost. And the fixed cost, the theory behind the fixed cost is no matter what happens, no matter how many gallons we buy from the Water Commission, we still need to operate the water system. And a lot of the fixed costs are really applied to those things. So as an example, if we pump no water today, we still have to do water samples. We have to fix main breaks, things like that. So I am recommending the adjustment to the fixed fee because it's easier to measure and budget for because it's a known number. If you have 8,000 customers in town, you know what that fixed fee is gonna be and you could build it into your 3-year budget. And if we were to look at a rate per thousand, it's a little different because we do not know the amount of gallons that are gonna be billed, how many gallons we're gonna pay for the Water Commission. So I think it's a better recommendation to look at the fixed fee. If the council's, going to look at anything. I did hand out 2 scenarios in the budget. One shows where the water fund would be if we just left the rates as they are, and getting out into there does show a significant decrease in any of the operating balance, as well as that deficit between the revenues and the expenses. And I don't remember exactly what percent, but it's probably about 60% or so, 50, 60% the water fund is literally buying our water from the DuPage Water Commission.
You said 70%.
Or 70%, and, they'll buy from the city of Chicago. We're all in a co-op, or have joined the DuPage Water Commission, so most of our expense comes from there.
Brian, just out of curiosity, I know DuPage Water Commission, we're going back 10 years, and this is when Rahm Emanuel was still mayor. We had a situation where the Water Commission was getting undercharged, they renegotiated and put the deal together. Is there any discussions, do you know off the top of your head, whether DuPage Water Commission and Chicago are gonna get back together and renegotiate again?
Yeah, the contract was recently up, and I believe, Ted, the most recent info was they extended it for a period of time because they were not close to coming up with a new agreement.
Okay.
And the DuPage Water Commission is actually operated by a separate board
Right.
That runs that, so
I guess,
they give us the minutes of the meetings and things, but I don't remember, I think it was about 2 years ago, we were more involved in that, they were having more meetings with us.
okay.
And at that time, the goal was to wait, try to extend it under the same terms and wait. There were a couple of big customers that were looking to join the DuPage Water Commission, that might have had an impact on things.
Yeah, actually, Ted, the reason they extended it to 2040 is the DuPage Water Commission is thinking about building its own water treatment plant and facility, which would run $2 to $3 billion.
At least.
They would bring the line through the northern suburbs to, I don't know exactly where, but then we would become, DuPage County would be the sellers of water to other municipalities, including Chicago, because the Darien water treatment plant is aged, and Chicago, they're not making the repairs on it that they need to make. So DuPage is more determined to become a seller than a buyer.
Gotcha, okay.
I've had this discussion with Brian, though. He's proposing a $10 per bill additional service charge. And I just mentioned to him that I think a lot of people, if it's a cents per gallon increase, people can sort of make their own decision. I'm gonna take 2 showers a week instead of 3 showers a week or whatever. You might have a little more control over it, especially as you have more retired people on a fixed income. So, I mean, you can get to the same number, although like Brian said, it's gonna vary a little bit. But that you can always adjust if the rate goes up. Currently, we're paying $5.56 per 1,000 gallons to DuPage, to the Water Commission. And if that goes up, I mean, you have justification for moving that up and down in accordance with whatever they're doing. But that, I think, would be an interesting discussion to have.
But we're still right now with the 20, we'll still be under $10 per 1,000.
Well,
$9.75.
are you talking about the
You
the
could-
$9.75
Right.
rate?
Yeah.
Yeah, so I mean, we always use an average of 10,000 gallons, so you take that number really times 10 and you'll see
You
your
pay a
rate.
$20 service fee.
No, I understand that. The point I'm trying to make is that we were pushing almost 10, and when you start to hit in those 10 numbers, that's when I think a lot of people start to question it.
Well, our water rates are still pretty reasonable compared to, I mean, I know
Otherwise,
my daughter
100%.
lives in Indian Head Park and they're almost double about what we are.
Well, I would tell you today, last couple of days, I've been looking for water rate surveys on the internet from other communities, because some have do this periodically. And I found 3 water rate surveys, we were not on any of them, which leads me to believe we're maybe one of the lower ones, and they didn't add us to their comparison. But the ones I did see, our water rate has been competitive on the lower side. And Mike, I did a quick analysis on what the rate per 1,000 would be to generate, a similar amount of money as the fixed fee. And for every 25 cents on the rate, we would get about $150,000. So you'd have to go about $1 a 1,000 on the rate to get somewhere close to the fixed fee.
And then the unincorporated areas, they pay a 20% surcharge, I believe.
Yeah, and that's factored in also.
And that would be true on either the fixed rate or the variable cents
Correct,
per
yes, yeah.
1,000.
Correct.
What is our current fixed rate per bill?
$10 per bill.
$9.75.
Oh, no.
No.
The fixed
The
fee.
fixed.
Oh, I'm sorry.
The fixed, yeah.
So we're doubling it.
Correct.
Okay, see, that's kind of sticker shock to me, and it also, we're kind of hitting people that are kind of trying to conserve money.
Yeah.
I'd like to see it split somewhere where we go 5 on that maybe, and then do your calculation at what, 50, if I'm
Solomon.
Yeah, exactly. 50 cents up on the rate, and that way, people that want to use, people that do use more water, bigger families, they're gonna get hit a little bit on the rate, but everyone is not gonna get hit $10.
Right.
So go up to 15 on the fixed fee per bill.
And then use your calculation to estimate what do we need to get to where we
balance,
need to
which-
get, which I think is gonna be about 50 cents.
I think, my quick math says that would be about 50 cents.
My quick math is in line with your quick math.
We'll let Mike in the group.
Do a combination,
That's, when I first read it, that was my initial thought, is I understand why you wanna do the fixed is easy, but it also, there's gonna be people that have, or they're in the house by themselves, and it's
Right.
really, they're taking
Yeah.
a big brunt of it at that point, if it's a single
I know a lot of those
person
people.
household.
Well, and the
So I think
theory-
mixing it up that way would be probably
And I
the
also
fairest
brought
way of doing it.
I also brought up like the snowbirds, the people that like are gone for a couple of months that really even shut off their water.
Similar theory was when we switched to the new garbage program. And we went away to this more of a unified fee. It ended up being really, really good for the community, but it was the same theory. There are people who didn't understand if they didn't have as much garbage, well, the truck still comes by. We still had all those fixed expenses, but
And that's why I
we could easily do a
think
combination.
5 would cover that
Yeah.
quote-unquote fixed expenses.
And that's something you could do, Brian, a
Oh, yeah,
combination?
Yeah, I would just double check the math tomorrow, but I think the numbers Tom said are about what we would come out at, yeah.
Do I have a consensus here that that is what people
That's-
are
yeah.
supportive of?
Cause at 10,000
Okay.
gallons, that'd be your bogey,
Yeah, per thousand, so it's 10 times whatever, that difference is in terms of the increase.
And Brian did explain this in pretty good detail on the explanation of the memorandum that went out with the budget on February 10th. So if you're looking to refer back to more details, it's on that memo.
Now, the increase, pending the discussion tonight, for the council meeting on Monday, I was preparing an ordinance, with some blanks on it, depending on what the council did. And I could put that on, probably move that from the first meeting to the second meeting in March.
Okay.
And that would still give us the ability to get it to the county in time to where, the timing's one thing. If the council does this within March, we can get it to the county, and the county bill that goes out shortly after that would take into account the previous months
Okay.
also. And there was a question of, well, people are using water now, but they don't know the rate. But at the end of the day, for our fund, it's still 12 months of revenue. So just so everybody understands, that would go back, when the next bill comes out in, I believe, May, it would include the 2 months prior.
And do we want to, at some point, try to explain this a little bit in maybe the newsletter or an article about it to people, explaining?
Yeah, normally we do that with the whole budget, and we can
Right.
do a separate article on the water rate, how it's calculated,
Right.
and explain that a bit more.
I think just to educate people.
And explain the impact.
Okay. Any more questions for Brian on this, the water rate?
One more, not so much the rate, but on the main water revenue budget, Brian, for the interest income, again, I think we're a little high on there. We budgeted 40 for this year, projecting 140, which I'm okay with.
Yeah.
Next year, you're budgeting 140 also. Again, the rate is dropping and our fund balance is dropping in there as well, so, I would think 60 to 80,000 would probably be in the real range.
Mike, is that fund balance dropping though with the new rate, or is that what you're looking at? I just want to double check. Because there's 2 sheets I handed, and one will bump that fund balance, but I'll look at that also to see.
Any other revenue questions for Brian? And should we jump into page 246? The budget summary? Okay. Dan, do you have anything to highlight here on page 246? Salaries, operating?
Not at this time, but more than happy to take any questions here.
There is under operating account 4213, there's backup on page 250 regarding an infra map work order software And this was something we discussed prior because it's being split with the streets budget. So I'm just pointing that out. There are, in several instances on this page and many under maintenance building, where you see the costs of items being split between water and streets.
Just to recap again on the 4213, we did take many items that were in various other accounts and put them into call it an organized system, and we worked with Julie, so we've got project codes, a little more streamlined and more efficient at this point.
So you guys have done some cleanup and,
Yes.
great.
I do have one question. I think, Julie, this may relate more to you, and I've noticed this consistently throughout most of our expense categories. The medical life insurance seems to have dropped quite a bit in most of the accounts. Have we gotten a better rate, or what's happening?
No, for the most part, the employees that we've hired are all under the age of 26. So when we are replacing elder, retiring employees with these young ones that are still on their parents' insurance, we're not putting them on ours. So that is why our rates have been going down.
Okay.
Any more questions on operating on page 246 in the water fund? Okay, we'll move on to page 247. We've got the maintenance building continued. Once again, with several items being split with streets, with backup provided on pages 267, 70, 71. Maintenance equipment, maintenance vehicle, maintenance water system. Any questions on the maintenance areas?
I guess this one, let's see, which one is it? You have the backup on it, the 225,000, the generator transfer switch plant 2 carryover.
Correct.
Showing carryover at 225, and last year was 157.
That's exactly, once we found out what some of the costs were.
Okay.
Any more questions on maintenance? Okay, then the rest of the page is postage, mailings, quality control, rent, equipment, supplies. Any other questions on page 247? Okay, we're gonna move on to 248. The balance of supplies. Then we've got supplies operation, training and education, telephone. Uniforms. Anything on the top of that page above contractual services? Any questions? Page 248. Okay, we'll move on to contractual services. We had conversation on account 4325 under the salt shed wall monitoring. We talked about that in the streets budget. Anything else under contractual services on page 248?
Just a quick one on janitorial services. Brian, we have cleaning supplies 1350, and then the next line, cleaning supplies 5900. I think the second one should be janitorial services.
It should be services, yeah, cleaning services.
Thanks, Mike. Any other questions on page 248? Okay. We'll move on to 249, forestry. And then capital purchases. Equipment. Several items being split with streets with backup provided, starting at page 315. And then going on to water meters. Dan, the whole water meter project has been complete for quite some time, correct?
Yes, and I can't do nothing but just brag about it because, again, there's been several scenarios throughout the year that residents have either left for vacation, long-term, short-term, whatever the case, and we've identified with DuPage County on call it an alarm, where we're able to find out next morning, hey, water's running over here, excessive use within overnight, 24 hours. We go out there, knock on the door, no one's home. We do shut the water off immediately. So really, I can't brag enough about the program.
Great. Okay. Then wrapping up that is transfers and then the debt retire. Do you guys want to speak at all about the debt retire and the bonds?
Right.
Just to note, the top bond, the 212 bond, is ending fiscal year '26. So that, and if you looked in the 3-year budget, that drops off in years 2 and 3.
Any other questions overall on the water budget?
And we mentioned this at the last meeting, but it's probably a good thing to reiterate in case somebody's watching this meeting. They didn't watch the last meeting. City council and staff, we go through all these numbers and, spend a lot of time talking about those. And once a budget's approved, it doesn't mean we just go out and do things. Most of these things that are over $5,000, like equipment, the chief's, a new request, comes back to the city council on a separate approval request.
Great reminder. Thank you, Brian. It often goes back to committee too, prior to coming to city council.
Yeah, exactly.
Lands in Tom's lap and municipal services. Okay, anything else on that? We're gonna move on to motor fuel tax budget, otherwise known as MFT. And do you want to talk the revenue side at all, Brian, or is that something you want Dan?
Well, the revenue comes from the state of Illinois. It's restricted revenue for certain expenditures. So when Dan prepares the budget, he knows what is allowed under IDOT for the use of that money. We typically get, well, not typically, every year we get estimates from the Illinois Municipal League on several things, including the MFT. And I usually follow that. I'll take off a few cents in case things are less than they anticipated.
Mayor, my apologies, what page is MFT on?
I'm sorry, page 359, page 359. Motor fuel tax.
Can I make a couple
Yes,
comments on
Mike's got some.
the overall? I'm not sure, I don't show a page number on there, but the overall spreadsheet showing the whole account. Right, projecting MFT allotment income, $858,000, the exact amount we have budgeted, but we're already a little over $100,000 year-to-date over that. So that may be a little conservative, but on the other hand, the interest income, you're projecting at $65,000, and we've only got $29,000 year-to-date, so that might be a little bit over.
I'll look at each of those again.
The other one I have on road material, it's a tough call, I know, projecting 262,000, and we had 111,000 in that as of January 31st. Tree trim removal budgeting showing projected 19,000 at 1,700 at January 31st.
Mike, if I may answer, in respect to a lot of those items, not to interrupt you, but tree trimming removal, there's a certain amount of monies that we could typically spend under the IDOT's program. So we try to take some of the monies that are allocated to be utilized within right-of-ways without not creating additional bureaucracy, if you want to say, by going back to the state for items that are over $20,000, because then it has to be in a contract format, and again, that's where typically I'll see that we end up buying or spending about 10 to 15% more in that perspective in the way we do it. So under that $20,000 threshold, we still have contracts, but we're able to allocate funds up to that $20,000 for certain events. So some of those events that you see in here or materials are probably under, what I'd like to do is typically at the end of the year, we'll go out balance with Julie to make sure that, my goal is always to use the MFT funds first. So there's sometimes, with the guys, okay, they don't know exactly how much, so on and so forth, so they take it to the general fund. Then we try to balance out, several times throughout the year to see where we're heading, if that clarifies things.
Thank you. As long as you're giving Brian your best guidance on that, I'm happy.
Okay.
Okay. Well, we're gonna jump into page 360, which breaks down the different categories for MFT. See if there's any questions on the various accounts, starting with salaries and benefits. Once again, some are split with streets. Then operating costs. Any questions on the operating costs?
I guess I'm just gonna throw it out, because we were talking about overtime with the police earlier. I'm looking at line item 4030 for $50,000 of requested overtime. Is that because of water main breaks and that kind of thing? Yes, no?
No, water main breaks you cannot use MFT funds for, so that's basically for snow plowing, snow events.
We are running under budget, 21,000 versus 38 year-to-date, 48 total for running under for this year.
Helps that we haven't had as much snow, I guess.
But like that,
Don't jinx us.
like-
Sorry.
Mind, it's not the snow events, it's the frequencies of the weather events.
Right, yes, yes.
Like Dan said, the more you can allocate here, I mean, this is restricted in the use, so this is the right place to put it. Okay.
Okay.
He has been better, he's been working with Julie as far as allocating more of the salaries and that he can directly allocate to this, so they've been doing a much better job at that.
Great. Contractual services and capital purchases. Any questions? Under MFT budget. Okay. Then we will move on to special service area, SSA.
As long as everybody, I'll just explain what this area is. This relates basically back to Terra Hills. Terra Hills, there's three service areas there. Those service areas are detention areas with native and or wetland plantings that's by agreement, they're all maintained. I have to say that, I think we're running status quo. We haven't raised any of these, anything here, and we're doing a great job on, inspecting, carrying out things such as beavers when they start building up nests, that we're, Johnny on the spots and making sure that additional ramifications aren't caused by such critters. So if there's any other questions to this, I think it's pretty much straightforward.
Do you know if they're planning a scheduled burn this year?
The answer is yes, and I believe we have one for Dale. One of them got postponed, and I can't recall each one, so we'll have one of those, Terra Hill ponds, I believe Dale, and we may have Eleanor coming up this year too.
Okay.
And what about other areas? You and I have talked about that before, the burns and stuff.
I think,
Like over by Walmart.
correct, now
I mean,
again,
that's in desperate need for a burn.
and while I will not argue that it's a need, it's what
It used to
Walmart,
be done every 3 years.
and
But
that
we
was,
just did one there, did we that?
Oh,
Because I thought you said you found a bunch of stuff in there, they found,
No.
was that a different place?
it was there, but they didn't burn anything.
Oh, okay.
That's Walmart property.
Got it.
So
I thought the
they're the
burn
ones that have
identified-
been,
Okay.
They
Correct.
used to do it every 3 years.
and every 3 years ago was how long ago? I wanna say it's at least
10
15
years.
years ago.
Yeah.
So.
Been a few years.
Right. Now, when a wetland is first developed, there's a rule of thumb, and especially now with the two-page water storm, it's within a two-page stormwater ordinance, in which case there's management plans. Those management plans, depending on the type of wetland, detention area, native areas, that could be under DuPage County jurisdiction and approval from anywhere to 3 to 5 years, up to potentially 7 to 10, based on the conditions and based on what was evaluated. There's management plans in place. And then for Walmart at this point, there's nothing that mandates them that they need to be doing the wetland management, by no means. If we see any type of invasive species there, we do have the right by code to go in there and basically find them and or remove them and charge them back. That's not been the case throughout Darien. I think we found couple instances over the years in regards to those types of species, and they were related back to, one of them was ours, one of them was a private residence, so that's not an issue. We've tried to contact Walmart several times in regards to being good stewards, and it has not been obviously, very successful.
I know even back there, it goes behind the fire department too. It's pretty bad back in there.
Again, that's part of the Abbey Woods, Darien Woodridge, fire station. So again, they're not mandated to do anything.
Any more questions on special service area? Okay, thank you, Dan. Anything else? I know we had a couple things on my notes from last week
Correct.
that we were gonna revisit.
If I may, I'd like to take a moment and just kind of, talk about the department. I think over the years, over the last 15 years, we've come a long way. I think a lot of our council members that have been on this council have seen the dramatic changes, and the capital budgets that we've put in place. So we all thank the city council for letting us purchase these things, do these projects. It's made a big difference, and I'm starting to see from our perspective that we're moving to a maintenance mode. And that maintenance mode is with, for example, ditches, that when people see cars pulling off into ditches, that they call the police, they call the public works immediately. And the policing is coming from from the residents, along with our eyes that are on the street through windshield observations. But I think I want to convey that, from the guys back to the city council, thank you for, things that we've been allowed to do, the purchases, so on and so forth. So with that said, Mayor, I'd like to turn it back over.
Okay, thank you. I had some notes from last week, and I also want all the rest of the aldermen and elected officials to have, if there's anything they wanna, but on my list I had tax abatement, grocery tax. I think we talked about the holiday lights, keeping it at 35,000. The grants for tree replacement I had noted. And I think that's what I have down as just semi-loose ends from last week.
I think the,
Sidewalks too,
yeah, Dan is still researching that.
Right.
Yeah, oh yeah.
the sidewalk.
Yeah, it's
I mean, is there a
very
way
common.
that because it's federally mandated that we can get federal funds? And
No.
that's it?
No,
Jerry, the mandated part, Dan is still researching too.
I'm sorry, I didn't flip, you're right, thank you. I've got that on next page,
No, I
sidewalk,
know
ADA
that, I know, but it's
sidewalks.
like, yeah, I mean,
Dan, I know you're still researching it, but did you mention last week that the color of the inlets have to be yellow now?
not the inlets, the truncated domes.
Okay,
Those were yellow years ago,
Thanks for
and
saying that,
it
'cause
went
it's
to
kind
red for whatever reason. Again, that was part of some regulations. So that's not a big deal, but now, you can't use concrete, for example, they used to have what they call a stamper,
yeah.
where you would just sink into the concrete once it's wet, and that would create your truncated domes. You can't do that anymore. So again, we've gone away from that probably, oh gosh, gotta be at least maybe 15, 20 years at this point.
So,
But,
and I know we've gone through and we've changed those all out to the red ones.
Right.
The yellow ones, is it one company that sells these or many different companies or?
Typically, well, there's several companies that sell them. What we do is we put all these, we put the item in the contract, that the contractor is responsible along with a 1-year warranty to supply the truncated domes. They're all a standard. So it's up to the vendor to make sure he's got the best pricing for these. We receive it as a unit price for the concrete with the dome, with these pads installed.
Why does the color make a difference?
Can't answer that right now. It's just, I guess it would, really what it is for the normal person to be able to see that there's a humps there.
Right.
Really, so that's about it. To the blind and or handicapped, it tells them that they're gonna be entering into a roadway.
The color doesn't matter to them.
The color doesn't, well, on a handicapped person in a wheelchair, yes, on a blind person, I'm not sure what they have the opportunity to feel and to what limits on the site.
I mean, and again, I'm just asking this question out loud. If the middle of a snowstorm, okay, and you gotta get across the street, wouldn't red be better in snow than yellow? I'm just asking a question, cause it just doesn't make sense.
It's up to the audience, one person likes yellow, one person likes red.
Some
and that's
people are
what the board-
colorblind.
You gotta go
It's
clear
true,
it
but
off.
but wouldn't that be more of a definition?
It's
A lot of this does not, the change in it does not make sense to me, a lot of what they're proposing.
And there's two different departments really that oversee this. One of them is Department of Justice, and then the other group they call the ProWAG, which is part of another ADA subsidiary. You know, the irony of this is, I got a hold of somebody in, I guess it was Washington today, and they told me that truncated domes were now required. So, you know what, I'm gonna take that as some type of fallacy because that's not the case. I was telling Brian about that situation earlier. So again, I'm doing my own research right now to find out specifically if these curbs along the runs of the ADA sidewalk are required.
Yeah.
So I wanna be, I'm not 100% convinced and, I'm not getting,
And I don't mean to cut you off, but for the people at home that are watching this, so they can kind of wrap their head around this. For 30 years, we at the city of Darien have done everything for ADA, making sure that we're in compliance and everything that goes with it. Not only us, but every other city that goes on in this United States. And then all of a sudden, the last 3 years, 4 years ago, they've changed the mandate onto it. And so we have to go ahead and change all of these to have wings on the side of it. And we're talking this year, 204,000, but if we do 12, if we're taking 12 years to turn around and fix them every year, we're talking almost $3 million, most likely.
correct.
And then you take it over the entire country to have, Mary's, it's hard to wrap your head around it.
I agree, and again, I wanna be 100% confident with an answer, and last answer we gave the council, it's undecisive from attorneys, back to insurance companies, back to engineers. It's a 50-50 split with no clear definition, period. So, we will provide a recommendation for or against. Right now, it's in there. The contract was bid for it in there. The contract was preliminarily approved, budget pending, and the contract will not be released back to the vendor until we have that, 100%. It's gonna be a cut to the contract, obviously, so.
Well, it sounds like you're doing the due diligence to get more details and how mandated this mandate is.
Correct.
Okay.
Dan, real quick question, like when we were talking about remodeling municipal services, there were some things were ADA grandfathered in. So are we looking into any type of grandfathering situation? I could understand if you're replacing the sidewalk because it has a crack in it or because it's outlived its use, that you would want to have it go to the new mandate. But taking a perfectly good one and changing it, I don't,
Intuitively, yes, that will be the common sense on it, but the actual regulation comes into play. It's when you resurface the street, when you do an alteration. So that's why, if we're doing pothole patching, even crack filling, that's not required that's not defined as an alteration, that's maintenance.
So the federal government's not expecting municipalities to go in and upgrade all of their crosswalks today. They're saying when you start to do street improvements, that's when you're required to make those modifications.
That is correct.
There's a difference between curb improvements and street improvements? Because this is curb.
Yes, as soon as you're fronting that roadway with that curb, or the curb is fronting that roadway that you're touching, the answer is yes.
If we talk to other municipalities,
Yes.
and they're all shrugging their shoulders as well.
I sent out a mass email back to a lot of my peers, probably 25 municipalities. Of 25 municipalities, I had 2 responses. And typically I get a lot of responses. So what does that tell you? I think.
Burying their head.
Right.
Is this something that we could go to Page Mayors and Managers, Metropolitan Mayors Caucus, Illinois Municipal League, all these great organizations we belong to tap into?
We could bring it up at the Page Mayors and Managers Conference, just to get the opinion of other.
And I'm sorry, that's where I've been. I've been to DuPage Mayors and Managers through that group. But we may have to, based on what I find, that there's a consensus on it between engineers and others. I think I'd like to bring this up as a topic back to DMMC to see if, this could be further vetted, whether it may even go, back to the mayors to be able to have the mayors kind of, kick the ADA in the butt if
Right.
you wanna say, to provide this further definition and illustration.
What you're gonna see, and I think, I mean, I'm just thinking of other communities, most likely not in DuPage mayors and managers, but other communities. This might stop them from doing road improvements because they can't afford to do the road improvement and this on top of it, which is unfortunate because, yeah, roads need to be improved.
And there's a clause in there also, the clause right now states, that you have the right, to forego, provided on a
Hardship kind of
financial basis.
Yeah.
So what does that financial basis mean? I don't think Darien qualifies
I
on
don't,
that Darien basis.
I'm sure it wouldn't, okay.
Okay.
Just always think about those unfunded mandates, you know?
It's like the water.
There's a
fund,
long
exactly.
list, there's a long list.
Mary, a couple things.
Yes.
You just mentioned a specific list of things, and we'll go through, and if the numbers have changed from any of the meetings, we put those in a recap sheet. But you did mention the grocery tax, just so the council's aware. That item will be at the Admin Finance Committee Monday evening to go through some options and talk about that. But secondly, you mentioned the abatement, not abatement. That would be helpful tonight if the council could give any direction. That will also be on the agenda, council agenda for Monday. And I'm
To
gonna give
abate
everybody a
the
heads
real
up.
estate taxes.
Yeah, on the general real estate taxes, there will be a proposed abatement ordinance that would follow with the budget that was presented to the council in year one, that we would maintain the property tax extension from last year.
Yep.
And I don't know if you want to conclude that tonight or
I,
get some more
I,
direction.
it's only 20 to 8, so I think it's time to dive into that. Does anyone need a break, a bathroom break, a snack break? Okay, yes,
Could use a break.
okay, we'll take 5 minutes. 5 minutes, and then we'll go back into tax abatement, and if there's back to tax abatement. So right now, we're on the agenda for Monday, March 3rd is a ordinance.
Proposed ordinance that
Based on conversations we've had up until this evening, a proposed ordinance to abate the tax levy that we voted on last fall, because now we're in the budgeting process. So we talked about last week, waiting till we're through the budgets to discuss that further. So I'm opening discussion on the tax abatement proposed to be voted on Monday, March 3rd.
There may be,
I'm in favor of abating.
So am I.
We've created a budget without having to do it. Why do it?
I agree.
Created a budget without having to add 400 and not cut any services that we're doing.
For next year.
For
But
next
then we've
year.
also looked
Right.
at budgets that further down the road.
Right,
The reality is, this is a conversation we're gonna need to dive into deeply every year.
yeah.
Just as long as we put as we go forward, putting the caveat out there saying, yes, we abated this year, but
Right.
No guarantee.
But there's no guarantee
Right. No.
based on what we've been talking about.
Yep.
Okay, so is there a consensus then to move forward with the voting of the tax abatement on Monday?
Yes.
Yep.
Mayor, I'm sorry, there will also be two other tax abatements. Those were in the water fund. Those are the bond payments that you saw earlier.
Right.
And every year we come with a bond abatement because those are in the water rates. Those were general obligation bonds, so they show up on the tax, they show up to the county until we abate those. So there'll be actually 3 abatement ordinances.
Okay, and those will all be on Monday's agenda?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay.
And then, like I think I mentioned this before when we started talking about it, I think it's imperative that we communicate back to our residents in the newsletter, in any methodology we can, because obviously when the discussion and the decision came in the fall to levy the additional dollars, it was all over the place that we're raising taxes. So it would be nice now to make sure that people know that for this, at least this next fiscal year, we were able to budget so that increased levy was not needed. Okay, going back then, the grocery tax and that whole premise, we'll discuss that at.
Yeah, that was just so the council knows it was an open discussion, like you said, so we'll be moving
And I
that
think
forward pretty
we talked about it last week, but just a recap, starting in, January 1 of 2026, the state will no longer be collecting that 1% to give back to the community. So it's up to us to decide if we continue that on or pursue other avenues to make up for that lost revenue. Okay.
There was a couple different estimates going around. Initially, I had about 650,000. Then there was an estimate from the Illinois Municipal League, and I looked at that. It was much less, and I think I understand why. But the amount originally we talked about that 650,000, is about the amount that the city would lose if we did nothing.
Right.
Now, can the state change their mind at this point?
I don't think this year.
State can always change their mind.
January
It was a
2026.
very
so-
popular move that
Right.
Democrats and Republicans supported, because it's something you go home and sell
Right.
your constituents.
Right.
And it's been put in the budget that way, the state of Illinois budget.
understand.
So I'm thinking if they change their mind, it would be happening, it almost like postpone, it would happen a year later, I think at this point.
Right now,
They're desperate
right
for
now,
money.
just as of today, Representative DeLuca submitted a bill that will call for an increase in LGDF. We filed a witness slip on behalf of that legislation, because it's going to committee tomorrow. That would call for an increase. We had an update yesterday at our legislative meeting that really addressed the governor's budget and what might happen this year and what might not happen this year. And it looks increasingly like there won't be money for us to get through LGDF. although you never know, that could change. But, the big bills that people seem to be pushing are the FOIA bills and the Open Meeting Act bill. We've filed witness slips on behalf of that legislation as well. He started out with $3.2 million the deficit. And revenues are up in the last quarter, which brought that down to like 1.2 billion. And then there's some other monies that they found that they cut that got them down where they're even, but there's a lot of aggravation on the part of one party down in Springfield that wants to spend more money on things that they think their residents want. And so it'll be interesting to see where the money goes. Chicago still wants 1.5 billion for the Chicago Public Schools. Mayor Johnson wants that. The RTA would like, the RTA has $770 million worth of improvements to make. Plus the CTA has a $1.5 billion pension issue. They want the state to give them some money, so people are going down there with their hands out.
yeah.
And they want the money that we want. And so it'll be interesting to see how it pans out. Our lobbyists indicated to us that, he explained everything in detail, which I can share with you, but it's gonna be a real different year down there this year with regard to our lobbying and getting any additional monies.
Right.
Anything else we need to discuss? Any other loose ends as it relates to the budget or things we would like to revisit this evening? No? I just want to thank everybody for preparing and taking the time and doing a deep dive analysis and the conversations and being present. And we will have several items on the agenda for Monday meeting. And at this point, we'll be voting on the final budget on Monday, April 7th.
Jerry, thanks for all your
Okay.
hard work.
And Jerry did a lot of analysis and.
Mary, great job. by the way.
Oh, thank you. Yes, Dan.
Barry, just one quick thing for the city council here. Monday night, we're gonna be presenting the roof quotes for award. So we got some great pricing, number one, and number two, if we don't pull the trigger prior to March, it's gonna be a 35% increase on all these roofing materials. So just a
Okay.
heads up on that. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. And we do have an administrative finance committee before the city council meeting on Monday, starting at 6, okay?
Don't we have municipal services too?
Yes.
So we got,
6:15.
okay. So you're double dipping there, Ted? Okay, okay.
think maybe Andrew
Okay. This meeting is adjourned. Thank you, everybody.